My friends, welcome back to the Financial Freedom Show with Chase Lawson. Thank you as always for tuning in for another episode. For those just finding this show, my name is Chase Lawson. I am the author of the book Financial Freedom, Breaking the Chains to Independence and Creating Massive Wealth. And one of my biggest passions is in personal finance. I've spent a lot of time learning and educating myself in this field, and the goal of this show is to make personal finance simple. Many people like to make it seem complicated, but when you take the time to learn and understand it, it's not that hard. So if you're tuning in today, you've already taken a huge step to set yourself apart from your peers, so kudos to you. Please go ahead and subscribe so you stay up to date with all future episodes released. We have another great episode on tap for you today. Joining the show today is Trevor Oldham. Trevor is a 23-year-old entrepreneur and founder of Podcasting You, as well as Building Wealth Made Simple, the personal finance site where he details his journey of paying off his student loans of $91,795.10 in exactly 1 year. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chase. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that I left off that you wanted to add about yourself?
I think that's perfect. Like you mentioned, I'm 23-year-old, graduated college in 2019. Luckily, not in 2020. Seems like it's a tough job market for the recent college graduates, but yeah, fresh out of college.
Well, I know we have a lot of great topics to cover today, including the importance of getting out of debt, why your income is your biggest wealth generator, how to pay off your student loans quickly, how to get out and stay out of debt, and the discipline needed for success. But before we begin, Trevor, I always like to know people's backstories. You know, not many 23-year-olds are running their own businesses. So how'd you get to where you are today?
So about 5 years ago, I was working a job and I was making $7.03 an hour. And I realized that $7.03 an hour wasn't going to cut it for the rest of my life. And at that time, I was a senior in high school. So it wasn't like the job prospects were opening up all around me, but I knew I just wanted to make some more money. And looking back, I had mowed people's lawns, I had bought and sold baseball cards, and just basically anything that I could do to make money on my own. And then as I was working that job, I just knew I wanted to figure out another way out. And I came across a book and it outlined the differences between the lower, middle, and upper class. And one of those differences was that the upper class had gone off and started their own business. And again, I was just thinking back to myself. And I was like, well, I've done these small things. Let me go out and try to start my own business. Just doing some online research, I came across a site called Alibaba and AliExpress. And for those listeners who may not know what they are, they allow you to import products directly from China. I was able to import 50 phone cases for $80, sold them on eBay, but quickly learned that if you buy name brand products from China, they may be knockoffs, as all my customers knew. So luckily they made great Christmas gifts that year. I think probably 90% of them got returned to me. And I think I still have some in my closet, but sort of just want to just keep building a business. At that point, I was a freshman in college, which was, I bought bracelets from AliExpress and watches, bought them for about $1 or $2 a piece, sold them for about $18 to $20. Business was going well. It wasn't making like tons of money, probably $300-500 a month. It wasn't like, life-changing amount of money, but still just trying to build online businesses, learn as much as I could about entrepreneurship and business building. And that led me to building a brand called Become the Lion. It grew to 600,000 followers in the first year. It just became this super big company. But what I realized is that people love motivational content. They'll like, share, and comment on it all day long. But when it comes to buying your product or service, that's kind of where people lack the discipline. People aren't, they love being pumped up. But when it comes to actually buying a book, buying a course, it really doesn't work out. And after about 2 years of that company, I just decided to put it behind me and started freelancing from using some of the skills that I had, which was editing podcasts, writing blogs. And I found someone one day that wanted to get booked on podcasts. I thought to myself, with Become the Lion, I had my own podcast. I booked guests on the show. How hard could it be to get her booked on shows? Worked with her. And then from there, I found a couple more other freelancing clients that wanted to get booked on shows and sort of grew the company to now it's gotten to the point where I'm no longer booking clients. I have a team that does it, and I'm pretty much more the sales and marketing guy for the company. And, that's kind of how it grew. It's sort of been like a 5-year journey to really get to this point where I am today.
Wow, it's pretty incredible. What was that book that kind of started that whole process for you?
I got to look at it. I can't remember the name of it, but I remember it was on Amazon. It was short. It was about 50 or 70 pages. I'm pretty sure it's probably ghostwritten. Probably someone, paying someone like $50 to write it. But, it was eye-opening to me to realize that, wow, there are people going out there and starting their own business. Because growing up, you're really just told to go to school and to get a job. And that's sort of it. And I was like, wow, there's like, people out there that are starting their own business, making their income on their own. I thought it was just like the most fascinating thing at that time.
I mean, obviously it sounds like you're very entrepreneurial at heart, but I think it's pretty incredible how you tried something and then figured out how to adapt. Basically, if the phone cases weren't going to work, so you started another business and then learned what you're good at from that business and started a new business. So figuring out what you're good at and then how to monetize that. So I think that's pretty incredible. So, and I think what you accomplished is pretty incredible as well. Just to repeat it, you managed to pay off about $90,000 in student loans in exactly 1 year. And I'm personally pretty big on when it comes to mindset. I think if you want to achieve something, you first have to commit to it. And a lot of people might look at their student loans or other debt that they have and think, oh, it's only going to take me a few years to pay off. It's only $100 or $200 a month or whatever it might be. That's not terrible. So they keep just paying the minimum, or they might hold out hope that the government will, completely wipe out their student loan debt, which may happen. But regardless, I think it says a lot about you that you had the mindset to accelerate the payoff of your student loans. Where do you think that mindset came from, and what inspired you to really tackle these loans so aggressively?
I think looking at it, well, my brother and sister are 30 and 31, so they're, 7 and 8 years older than me, and they both graduated school with student loans, and they're currently still paying off their student loans. And I saw my sister's paying about $700 a month, and my brother's paying about $450 a month. And I realized that I just didn't want to be paying my loans forever. And sort of what got the process started is, honestly, I didn't even know how much student loans I owed. I thought I owed about 60,000. So it came out to like 89,500 when I first looked at it. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of money. And I was just looking at how much money I was making at the time. And I did some math and looking at some like student loan calculators and realized I could be paying, I think it was $1,150 a month for 7 years, and I'd fully have them pay off. And I was like, I'm going to be 30. I don't want to wait till I'm 30 to pay off these loans. So I was like, okay, what happens if I pay $1,500 a month? And that was going to knock off 2 years. So I'd pay off my loans in 5 years. And I was like, I'm going to be 28. I want to buy a house at some point, in the near future. That's not going to happen by paying $1,500 a month for these student loans. I was like, you know what? Let me just put everything I have, everything I make extra. I depleted my savings. I went down to a $1,000 emergency fund, which was a little scary at that time, but I just pretty much threw everything I had on it. And I said, let me just do it for 1 year and see how that's going to work. And I thought I'd pay off my loans in about 2.5, 3 years, but pretty much just over time, it just happened so quickly. And I think that when someone gets started and gets over that hump in the beginning, because the biggest thing for me was depleting my savings and going down to that $1,000 emergency fund was probably the hardest thing. I had saved up through college, which it was about $11,000, and I was going to use that money to actually buy a house, and to realize that now it's going to Sally Mae, and then on top of that, not even realizing that my interest was accruing while going through school. It was a little bit hard, but I felt as though once I got over that hump, then once I got into the second month, everything I made just went to it outside of expenses. And I found that over time, it became a little bit easier. And I think that's the hardest part for people, is getting started, and they can't really picture for themselves that it's possible to pay off their loans or start a business, to get a certain job. But I feel like people don't try hard enough. They just give up too easily. And I think that's what really holds a lot of people back, especially when it comes to student loans. Because when I tell people my story, they're like, oh, I can never do that. I'm like, well, you can, but if you give yourself that attitude that you can't, then it's never going to be possible for yourself.
I think it's important to know there. I mean, you obviously had to make some sacrifices, like you mentioned, depleting your emergency fund, which, obviously it's nice to have an emergency fund. A lot of people don't even have an emergency fund. So the fact that you had that to start with is great. But I mean, I'm assuming that obviously you were still bringing an income over this time. So it's not like you were paying all this money and depleting your account and didn't have money coming in to, help make up for that, right?
Exactly. Yep. So always made sure, always just number one, made sure I had enough money to pay the bills. And it was always in the back of my mind, like, if I ever got myself really into a pinch, I would just put my loan on like a 20 or 30-year payment plan, and knock the payments down to like $250 a month. But I always knew that was there. But I just feel like it almost like pushed me to just get out from under this burden, get out from this debt, because I knew that I was going to have that freedom once I got to that end. And these loans were sort of just taking up the freedom in my life, because instead of me taking that money and saving it, or me going on vacation, or me just having fun with it, it was just going to all these student loans. And I just knew I didn't want to go out on a vacation and spend $2,000 or $3,000 on a really nice vacation, knowing I could have just paid that money off my loans, and that my loans are increasing $10 a day. It was just, I think it's just more priorities for me than anything.
Definitely. And, obviously we as a society are unfortunately very debt driven. It starts at the very top with our government. We're currently over $27 trillion in debt as a country, with no signs of that slowing down anytime soon. And If you do the math, that's over $82,000 per person in the country. And I've discussed this many times on my show. The average American doesn't have an emergency fund, like I just mentioned. They might have, they probably have $1,000 or less in savings, and they have thousands of dollars in debt. Debt can really eat at someone, and it can keep them from achieving their goals. Whether that's retiring earlier or doing more in their life, like you mentioned, being able to take trips or leaving a legacy behind or whatever that might be. But I'm curious, Trevor, what's your input on this? Why do you think it's so important to get out of debt?
I think the biggest thing is that getting out of debt is just going to give you peace of mind. Think about it. If all you had was your mortgage and it's $1,500 a month and you have really no other outside expenses other than utilities and car insurance, your car is paid off, you don't have this credit card debt, it's just going to give you peace of mind where if you're bringing home $4,000 a month in your paycheck and you only have $1,500 in expenses, well, now you can probably invest, $1,500 a month. You can save $1,000 a month. It's just going to give you that peace of mind. And I think that the biggest problem that most people have in their life when it comes to worries, it's almost always going back to money, and it's generally not having enough money. And what's that reason behind not having enough money? It's usually because people are spending too much, or they've taken on too much debt. They've taken a car payment that they can't really afford on their income. And I think by not having debt, it just gives you that peace of mind that if you lost your job or if you own your own business and there was a downturn, you'd still be able to survive because you don't have this burden of having to pay your credit, your car loan company, all those sort of expenses. And I think the biggest thing is just giving you that peace of mind to knowing like, okay, if I got laid off, I'm going to be okay because I don't have that much expenses. I know that I can scrape by for the next 6 months or so with my emergency fund, or even if you don't, I could go out there and get a job with Amazon. They pay $15 an hour, and yeah, it might not be the greatest job, but I don't have a ton in expenses where I know it can scrape me by until I get my next job. And I think that just really gives people that sort of peace of mind where if you were, you had a $30,000 car or $30,000 loan on your car, which is, $400 a month, and you had, another 400 in student loans and, another 200 a month in credit card, $1,000 a month that's going right out of your pocket into those, those places. It's going to be a lot tougher on you if something bad were to happen in your life.
Definitely, yeah, and obviously, we all have those fixed expenses that we have that, we're responsible for to get by, no matter what happens to us with our jobs or our life. You have to pay for housing, you have to pay for food. So it's another fixed expense is those monthly debt payments. I mean, that's just keeping you from being able to do things with that money. One of the things that you mentioned to me before the show was how your income is your biggest wealth generator. And when people are trying to look for ways to start saving more money, they typically start by focusing on lowering some of those expenses, which obviously is very important. And you should cut maybe what's not necessary in your life if you're trying to get out of a hole. But there's only so much that you can cut, and it might not be worth it to cut some expenses if it keeps you from being able to enjoy life. Not many people though focus on increasing income. So can you perhaps dive into that topic a bit more and share your thoughts on increasing income and what you mean by your income is your biggest wealth generator?
I think the hardest thing when it comes to, building wealth is going to be generating more for your income. It's going to be really hard to cut your expenses because there's going to be a certain point where it's just going to be a cap on you. You can't just, unless you want to get rid of your car, get rid of your house. Those are just going to be fixed expenses that you have. If you're going to cut, say, $500 a month from your monthly expenses, I think making $500 a month on the side is going to be a lot easier for yourself and for your sanity than cutting out these expenses. And you can only really cut your expenses so low where if you're building up a side hustle where you have your full-time job, it's going to allow you, there's basically no cap to it. No one's going to say, oh, you made $500 this month in your side hustle or your side job. That's it. You can make 750, you can make 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 and up. And there's just no cap on it, where I think with your expenses, there is sort of a cap because there's only so low that you can go while also enjoying the quality of your life. So I think your income is just going to be your biggest wealth generator. The way I see that is, even if you don't go out there and start your side business, if you don't have any debt and your fixed expenses are, say, $1,500 a month, but you're bringing in $4,000 a month, that's going to be really nice instead of someone that brings in $10,000 a month and has $10,000 worth of expenses. So by cutting off that debt, and then you have your income on the other side, your income is going to allow you to grow over time. You're going to be able to invest a lot. You're going to be able to save a lot. I find that too many people have too much debt and they use their income to pay off that debt, where, your income's going to Toyota, your income's going to Visa, or wouldn't it be nice if your income was just going to, Fidelity or Charles Schwab or Vanguard? And I think too many people are putting have their income going into the wrong places, where I think their income is really what's going to allow them to build wealth. Because a lot of people, they're comfortable working jobs. They're comfortable, having that income come in every 2 weeks. And that's perfectly fine. That's, 90% of the people I'm associated with, that's what they have and that's what they love. But, you got to use the income that's coming in every 2 weeks to help build that wealth. Because at the end of the day, no one's going to really do it for you. And to save that wealth comes from just, making more or cutting some of those expenses, at a certain point.
And as you mentioned, for some people who are completely satisfied with their day job and might be asking for a raise or, looking for ways to take on more responsibility to then get paid more with their current job and increasing income that way. For others like yourself, obviously, that was starting a side hustle, and obviously you've pivoted. You started with Alibaba, and then now you built a, pretty successful brand with podcasting um, and as you mentioned, you started this all when you were in college. So I think there's a lot of people listening. They might be 23 as well, or they might be 33, 43, 53 years old, and they have aspirations of creating their own thing, but for whatever reason, they hold themselves back from accomplishing this. What advice would you give to those people?
People hold themselves back. One, they don't think they have the skills. And then two, they also think that's going to cost too much money. And what I say to those people, best thing that you can do is just start freelancing. You don't need a website. You don't need, a big portfolio. When I first started freelancing, I would take on jobs writing a 200-word blog post for $5 just to get feedback and to try it out, and just started small. Then I took on a job. I think it was a law firm. They would pay me $20 to write an article for the blog. And I just started small, and I got to branch out freelancing and sort of see the things that I like to do, whether that was blog writing or helping people with their podcasts, and eventually obviously getting people booked on podcasts. And it really just allowed me to try it out. I didn't need a website. I didn't need anything like that. And there's really no money involved other than your time upfront of applying to these jobs and building a good profile. And then over about, 1 year in, I was still working for myself. I was doing everything. And then year two, that's when I hired my first employee. And then year three, now we're up to 4 employees, and sort of just grew over time. So I don't think people, you don't need a website to start out. You don't have to hire people on your team right away. You don't need this big marketing budget. Really, for the first year, I just use Upwork to get my clients, and it worked for me. I didn't do any Facebook advertising. I didn't do, any local advertising. There was no money involved. I'm very risk adverse, and I don't want to just be putting my money out there unless it's going to be generating a return for myself. And I just think that freelancing is the best way to go about it. And again, just starting small, figuring out what you like to do. If I built a website, wanting to write blogs for people, writing blog posts for people, after a year, I realized I didn't really want to do that. It takes a lot of time. It's not the most enjoyable task. After about 5 or 6 hours of writing blog posts, I'm pretty much dead for the day. I'm exhausted, and I realized that didn't give me life. So I'm glad I didn't build a website on that. I'm glad I didn't bring on additional employees, and it really just allowed me to figure out what I wanted to do. And again, there's no cost to freelancing other than maybe some minimal skills. If you wanted to take a course or two on Udemy, they're always running sales for $15 or $20 and helping you out there. But there's no real cost to it. You don't need a website, you don't need employees, and then you just gain your skills over time, and you find out what you love to do.
Definitely. And yeah, I think obviously another point is that you don't have to start right away by quitting your job and going 100% into a side hustle. You can, if you have a couple hours here or there, try something out, find what you're passionate about. I know you mentioned starting out, you paid $80 for some phone cases on Alibaba. That's a small investment. And then you mentioned, offering your time, doing blog posts. So that's more of a time investment. So you don't have to go all in, hire employees, build a website out, start an LLC, things like that they were mentioning. So I think that's a good point. Start small and see what works out. And if it starts working and you build success on that, then slowly grow it over time. But you don't have to, quit your day job, so to speak. So now obviously paying off as much as you did over that year, I mean, if you do the math, it's over $7,000 a month that you're paying towards your student loan. So I'm assuming you had to make a lot of sacrifices over this time. What were some of those sacrifices that you had to make to be so aggressive with paying off your student loans?
I think the biggest thing is just everything I made that came coming in outside of my expenses just went right to my student loans. And that was really hard, especially running my own business. I didn't really have any savings. If anything went wrong, if I, 1 month I didn't get enough new clients, I wouldn't be able to make payroll. It was scary, but at the same time, I just wanted to get it over with. And I knew if I just pushed through that 1 year, it would help. But the biggest thing was just taking everything I had and just putting it onto those student loans and just making that sacrifice. And what really helped me in my business is I went from, at that time, I worked as a pay-as-you-go service. So a client would come to us, we would get them booked on a podcast, they would do their interview, then they would pay us. And what I learned is that people would do that. They would get booked on 5 or 6 podcasts and then they would disappear. Well, what I did is I changed my pricing services to now I'm charging 3,000 to 5,000 for people to work with us. The clientele coming to us is a lot better. I would have them pay on monthly payments, so my income wasn't fluctuating. And the first month I did that, I did 14,000 in revenue and I had $3,000 of expenses. So I basically took that 11,000 and was able to slap it right on my loans. And pretty much since April, that's when I made that change to, more of these high ticket services. Clientele was better. I breathed better at night knowing I had guaranteed income coming in every month because we work on payment plans. And that was just the biggest thing for me was charging those prices to that $5,000 mark, which was, it was crazy for me because at that time I couldn't afford my own service for what I was charging my clients, but they worked and no one even said anything. And I went up a little bit. I started at 3,000, then I went up to 4,000, then I went up to 5,000, and along the way, no one ever said anything. They were willing to pay that higher price each time. And I was like, wow, imagine what it would have been like if I started my business like this in the beginning, because working on pay as you go was easy in the beginning, but making that mindset switch to understand that there are people out there that have the money to afford my services and that I'm going to do a good job for them. And then once sort of that happened, money started coming in a lot more. And I found that people saw the company to be more valuable than, this guy's charging me $100 versus this guy's charging us, 4 or 5,000. They're going to be a little bit more serious. They probably know what they're doing. And it just brought on better clients, made it more enjoyable. And I think that was just the biggest thing. So whenever I would get a client, I would say sign a $4,000 contract. I would put 3,000 right on my loans and put 1,000 away for taxes and to pay my employees. And it just basically worked like that. And, I wish I could have enjoyed that money a little bit more, because as soon as I paid off my student loans, I had basically $0 in my bank account, basically not living month to month, but running the business month to month. So now it's been nice over the last month or two, but that was just the biggest thing, is just throwing everything I had on it and knowing, not really saving anything and just going for it.
Definitely, yeah. And I think that is important, obviously, to know your worth. And obviously, your worth will develop over time. And you might be worth something today, and then as you build your skill set up, be worth more in the future. And obviously, continue to check your own worth and determine, hey, what is my price point? Whether that's for your employer if you have a day job, or what prices you're charging your customers if you have your own business. So how do you think those sacrifices will ultimately benefit you moving forward here?
I think the biggest thing is just creating the self-discipline when it comes to budgeting. When I first started off, I never had a budget when it came to monthly expenses. So now I know my monthly expenses almost down to a T. I know how much I have coming in. Obviously it fluctuates a little bit, but I know at least my monthly expenses. And if I wanted to add something, or if I did want to cut something out, I would know exactly what it was. And I think it just made me better being able to manage my money. I always thought that I was decent at it, but obviously couldn't have been that great if I owed that much money in student loans. But it really just allowed me to value money a lot more and to understand what impact it can have good when it comes to investing, and then also the bad impact that it can have when it's going out the door. So at that point, I think it was just a bit that it built up that sort of discipline in myself to know I never want to get back into debt, other than potentially investment properties or a house, but never credit card debt, never sort of car loan, never definitely more student loans. If I ever wanted to go to graduate school, I would save up all that money, even if it took 10 years in advance. So I think that was just the biggest thing, was understanding the differences between good and bad debt, and really realizing early on how bad debt can really bring you down, and how much it can really affect how much money you save.
Definitely, yeah. And did you have any other debt, or was it just student loan debt?
Yep. So I had a car loan as well, which was about 4,000 bundled in there.
Okay. So is that completely wiped out now?
Yep, correct.
Awesome. So no debt whatsoever?
No, which is nice.
Awesome.
It's honestly, it's crazy to me sometimes, like when I look back at it, especially when I made my last loan payment. So I used Earnest and I went on and I made my final payment. And it was like, it could show you like when you transferred the loan over, which was September 30th, 2019. And the last payment was September 30th, 2020. And I was like, wow, it was crazy to me when doing it, especially I wanted to get it fully paid off. And, I was hoping by the time I was going to be 24, and I was like, oh, that might be too ambitious. And it was like by 25. And I know sometimes I just think it's crazy. And I don't like to think about it too much, where it also makes me sad, realizing how much money I spent going towards the student loans, which now I don't even really use that degree either.
Well, hey, I mean, obviously doing the math, it's between $7,000 and $8,000 per month on an average month. So the fact that you were so aggressive with that money, now frees up $7,000, $8,000 to use on other things, whether that's investing or putting back into your business or doing fun trips here and there, so frees up so many possibilities for you. So that's incredible. Well, I know you managed to get quickly out of debt. So what advice would you have for our listeners on how they can get out of debt and ultimately stay out of debt?
I think the biggest thing is just creating a budget, making sure, seeing how much money you have coming in and going out, and then sticking to it. And then along with a budget, look at what you have, especially when it comes to like grocery shopping, as an example. I always just make a list right before I go so I don't make additional purchases. And I'll check the weekly ads and see what sort of coupons they have, see if there's something that I generally buy that they might have $2 or $3 off, because all that money is going to add up over time. So it's really coming up with your expenses, making less, especially before you go grocery shopping. Because when I didn't, I would sort of know what I would want to buy, but I would buy a lot of stuff I didn't necessarily need, and the bill would go up quite a bit. So I think creating a list saves about 25% on your monthly grocery bill. And then when it comes to staying out of debt, just don't pay for stuff that you can't afford with money you don't have. I think that's just the biggest thing. People try to, they might want to go on a vacation that costs $2,000 and they have $1,500 saved up, and they think it's okay to put that $500 on a credit card. And it becomes easier. Then when you're on that trip, maybe it's actually, you want to go out and buy some stuff, and that starts to add up, and you think that, the credit card, I have $1,000 on the credit card, but the monthly payment's only $50. That's okay. And I think that mindset, people are never going to be able to get out of debt. And once you realize that, it's much more gratifying when you save that money, when you save up, it's probably going to take a little bit longer for you to save up that $2,000 than it is to save, 1,000 and put the rest on your credit card. But think about it, when you're on the trip, you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about when you get back the additional expenses. So I think just playing the long game, it's not the most fun thing, it's not the most sexy thing. It's just playing it. It's smart and simple, and just understanding, just don't spend more than you make. And I think you're generally going to be okay.
Yeah. And going back to one of the things you touched on before, and I touched on this recently in my episode on how I think New Year's resolutions are BS, is the difference between discipline and motivation, and how motivation is based on emotions, while discipline deals with logic. And discipline is going to get you through troubling times, whereas motivation will dissipate and if you get depressed or feel unmotivated or whatnot. But I think one of the keys to success, no matter the field, is having discipline. And I know you agree with that idea, but what's your opinion on how one can ultimately build the habit of discipline, and why it's ultimately needed if one is to have success?
I think the biggest thing about discipline is building a routine. So like for myself, I get up in the morning, have the same routine where I go to the gym, I come back, have, that part of my morning routine, and then begin work. And then I have, sort of dinner at the same time. Then after dinner, I get back to work. So I think it's just a routine for me where it's almost on autopilot. And I think, the hardest thing is getting sort of yourself on autopilot. Like every day I read a book from about 9 to 10 or 9:30 to 10:30. So it's the same time every day. Then I know I'm going to work, from 10:30 to 12, then I'm going to eat lunch 12 to 1. And I think it's those small little habits that are going to build up over time. Like every morning I write in my journal, what I want to get accomplished for the day. And it's just a habit I built up over years, where at this point, if I wake up in the morning and I don't write in my journal what I got to get done for the day, I almost feel like the day is not going to go good. I get anxious. I feel like it's just not going to be a good day overall. So it's just building up those little habits over time. And you shouldn't want to go in and implement them right away, because it's going to be hard. If you go from waking up at 8 in the morning, you want to start waking up at 6 in the morning, that's going to be super hard. Go to 7:30 and 7 and 6:30 and so on. Same thing if you want to start reading a book and you want to start a business and you want to start working out. It's just going to be too many things at once. And I think that's where a lot of people fail, and especially New Year's resolutions. As you'd mentioned, I find that a lot of people set these big audacious goals for themselves. They say, I want to start a business that makes $1 million this year, but you've never even made $1. That's going to be most likely, not possible. Why not set a goal to make $10,000 this year? And I think people, it's good to think big and have these massive goals, but I also think you got to be smart about yourself. If you want to start working out and you want to build that discipline, don't go to the gym 5 days a week. You're not going to like it. You're not going to enjoy it after about a month or so. And I think people try to chew off too much too soon, where if they just start small and just take it one step at a time, that's going to allow you to build up that discipline, where if you go to the gym 2 or 3 days a week over a 2 or 3 month period, if you get to that 4th month and, now you're going to want to go to the gym, whether you like it or not, because you've built up that discipline and built up those habits. And I believe it takes about 90 days to build up those strong habits. And those habits really allow you to become disciplined in your life. And it really just starts with starting small. If you want to start reading, if you want to, build a business, just take it one step at a time. Don't try to do too much. I always say, Rome wasn't built in one day. The Colosseum, it wasn't all put together in one day. It happened over, day by day, action by action, year over year, day over day. And that's what allowed it to got built. And I find that too many people want to have their entire Colosseum built in one day when they don't realize it's going to take all these small action steps to sort of build up to that, that big item.
As you mentioned, it's so important to start small, whether that's 5 minutes a day in the gym and then the next week 10 minutes a day, or first month trying to save $100 and then $150 the next month, or reading 10 pages a day and then next month 15 pages a day. Just start small, especially know where you are today and know where you're trying to get to, but be manageable and mindful in that approach of how you're going to get there, and take those small steps and slowly build on that. So going hand in hand with discipline is definitely, along the realm of goals. So talk to me a bit about goals and how you implement those in your life.
The biggest thing when it comes to goals is I look out at the target and then I just try to simplify it down. As an example, with my student loans, I looked and I said, okay, I want to get them paid off in 7 years. And I became comfortable with paying them off in 7 years. And I realized, all right, I have a little bit more capacity. I could pay them off in 5 years. And then once I got, comfortable paying them off in 5 years, and I said, okay, let me go shoot for sort of, trying to get them paid off in 3 years. And I was like, what, try to get them paid off in 3 years and I can get them paid off in 1 year. And I think that the biggest thing for me when it comes to goal setting is, creating this sort of bigger goal. My goal is to make $1 million in 1 year. I know that's probably not going to happen this year. So like, let's say instead of that, my business is making, say 150,000 this year. Next year, I want it to make 250,000. And then, by year 5, I want to be making $1 million. So it's really looking at these long-term goals that they may be big, but breaking them down into these smaller chunks that are going to be a lot more attainable. Like if someone wants to run a marathon and they've never done it before, you're not going to go outside and run the whole 26 miles. You're going to start, you're going to run a mile one day, then maybe next week you run 3, and maybe by 10 weeks in, you're running 10 miles at a time, and you build it up over time so that you eventually hit that goal. And again, it just goes back to taking those sort of small steps, with even if you do have that big goal at the end and that you can look at. But again, just realizing that it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. Success isn't very linear. It's going to be up and down. You may be training for that marathon and you run and you trip and you twist your ankle and you're out of commission, for 6 weeks. And that's what happens. And just understanding that you're going to come back stronger. And again, like my student loans, as I mentioned, I was taking everything from my business and putting onto my student loans. And at one point I took on a client. She had paid us upfront $3,500. After about 4 or 5 months, it was a total nightmare of working with her, and I didn't really see any other option other than to refund her money, and that was where I would see as my biggest bump in the road when it came to paying off my loans, and realizing that it's okay, it's gonna happen, just breathe, and to understand that there's gonna be a tomorrow, and tomorrow I'm gonna be able to get back up and then keep pushing forward. And I think people let too many of the down events get them down, and they sort of stay down instead of picking themselves back up and realizing that tomorrow's a brand new day. You can start over and start helping yourself again.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. Well, I know we talked a bit about podcasting you, but haven't really touched too much on building wealth made simple. Mind sharing a bit more about that?
Sure. So after I paid off my loans and I just posted a photo on my Instagram account, I actually had quite a few friends and family reach out to me and ask me how I did it. And I sort of, told my story a little bit, but to them, and I realized that, it'd be cool to go out there and start a blog. I had a blog a long time ago, but this time I wanted to start a blog that taught others, basically 3 principles, which was 1, how to start a side hustle, which, podcasting you was, and then eventually turned into a full-time hustle. And then also how to use that side hustle to pay off your student loans. And then now, I'm in sort of that next phase, which is building wealth. And I really just wanted to build a blog teaching people those 3 principles, because I find that enough people, they don't know about student loans and what can actually cost them in the end. They don't know how to build a side hustle. And then also building wealth, which is something I'm still learning. I figure if I could, interview people, if I could talk to enough people on that building wealth side, it would be pretty good. And I just wanted to create a platform for that. And then also I want to go out there and start a blog, also with the goal to make some money off it. I don't want to be doing it for free. And I had clients of mine, Alex and Lauren, from the site called Create and Go, and they were making about $150,000 a month blogging. So I purchased their course and I took it and I loved it. And, my goal for this blog is just to, first year, just make enough to cover my expenses, which is about $1,500 on any given month, while also being able to teach others, sort of what I learned and being able to help them out. And just a small little personal finance blog, nothing too crazy yet, just starting off and finding my way. But I just want to sort of help people if they do have questions about, especially when it comes to side hustling or paying off their student loans. Because I think even student loans, when I transferred from federal loans to private loans, I didn't even know what could happen. And basically all whatever the government put in place where there's no interest accruing on your federal loans, well, private loans don't really care about that. So I didn't get any advantages of that. So I just think teaching people things like that, the differences between those things, just trying to help people any way that I can.
Great. Well, Trevor, thanks again for coming on the show today. For those listening in who want to get in contact with you, either for help with podcasting or about anything personal finance related, how can they find you?
Sure. So they can go to our website, which is podcastingyou.com, or they can just go to buildingwealthmadesimple.com. And then, of course, if they want to reach me by email, probably the best one right now is just trevor@podcastingyou.com.
Awesome. Well, once again, on behalf of myself and all my listeners, thank you so much, Trevor, for hopping on and the great advice you've shared. To recap some of the main points we discussed today, debt will eat at you and keep you from your goals. So it is important to get out and stay out of debt. It's important to try and increase your income, as that is one's biggest wealth generator, and discipline is one of the traits most needed for success. This has been the Financial Freedom Show with Chase Lawson. If you liked today's episode, go ahead and like it or leave a review, share with others, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content like this. Thanks again, and until next time, stay safe and go get 'em.